jail the whole time. And then he kind of got out. So he would have, if he's in the jail, not able to vote, even if he has a hold for something.
Because as soon as he got arraigned, and I think his arraignment day was April 13th, was it May 7th? Oh, they issued the warrant. I believe it was. A little while ago. Because he, I mean, he had it coming.
You been back there?
Yeah.
Do you guys know where the judge will want people to be at the podium? Or in the
When they
where
speak?
Yes, ma'am.
At the podium. Are they full pages?
Tell them go on.
Oh, that's why they open it.
Where's Miss Griggs at? She's not coming today either? Yeah. Huh?
Well, I don't think she has her coming till like 1.
Why so late? And why don't we start? I mean, what were we waiting for?
Yeah.
She hasn't arrived.
Well, now he'll get his opportunity without
put D. I don't know yet to the end. I thought it was protein and DNA. I don't know. We'll see at the end. Skeletal amount of adenine and DNA always equals amount of thymine. Francis Crick. Scientists thought only complex DNA could give instructions and be copied during cell division. The twisted ladder shape of DNA is called I thought I'm gonna say a helix. Helix. How you spell helix? I think that's it. DNA is copied every time a cell does what? Generate.
I know. Sure, I'm all.
Hey. Is an extra base add.
How's everybody?
Fingerprint. Let's see that chain link. The change in DNA sequencing can be chain link. Hey. Mm-hmm. What? She said so long. Well, I thought maybe she went before she came. I thought she was out here when she came. Okay. What is the cell organelle where the protein is synthesized? A gene. Hey, what's up? Type of RNA that delivers amino acids to make a protein is called. I know that.
What y'all got? You got something good? This is such an idiot.
All right.
Are you, excuse me? So they gave you some? I don't know, you never gave me any.
You know what, I was giving a lecture, and Jesse Jackson interrupted my presentation,
Why?
because he was there. He was in the building.
Oh, well,
Comes up, and I'm like, really?
yeah,
Jesse Jackson, really?
yeah. He walked with Dr. King, yeah.
No, I have no problem with it, I'm just saying.
That's why he did it.
So that was after I said, yeah, you guys want to punish my stuff, no one cares what I have to say.
This was quite the report. Who's the first? This is quite the report. Have you ever seen a report this thorough?
Once
I've never
before,
seen one like this.
just once before,
Huh?
just once before.
Not like this.
Oh, yeah.
Who? Now, I never had a case where they did that. Oh, that's the investigator.
But it's not.
Actually, it was a little short.
It ain't no more.
125 pages.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yes, I am.
What's up today?
Not, oh, does he have one?
No, I don't know anything about it, which is fine.
So did you tell them that he was kind of, you told them? Yes, you did.
Court is back in session. Remain seated and quiet.
Madam,
This is case number 138320, the People versus Robert Bashara. Today is the day for sentencing.
Mr. Donaldson, can you approach it? Oh, appearances for the record. Oh, I'm sorry, here.
Case number 138320, the People versus Robert Bashara. Mr. Bashara is here today to be sentenced.
Appearance for the record.
Good morning, Your Honor. Lisa Lindsay on behalf of the people of the state of Michigan.
Good morning, Your Honor. May it please the court, Robert Moran, Assistant Prosecutor.
Good morning, Your Honor. Patrick Muscat on behalf of the people.
Morning, Mark Hindling on behalf of the people.
Judge, good morning to you and your staff. Lillian Diallo on behalf of Robert Bashara, who's present in front of me.
Good morning, Your Honor. Michael McCarthy appearing on behalf of Mr. Bashara.
Good morning, Mr. Bashara.
Good morning, Your Honor.
You may be seated.
Okay.
This is the date and time set for sentencing. And here's a situation with the media. I can't have that shutter no more. It's too distracting and my stenographer. Can you put on silent?
I can't see the judge.
Huh?
I'm sorry, I can't see, Your Honor. I was asked to move one way and I can't see, excuse me.
Well, who you need to see?
Pardon me?
You just need to see me.
That's right.
Okay, very good. Anyway, have you had an opportunity to review the pre-sentence report?
Your Honor, I have had the opportunity to review the pre-sentence investigation report. Mr. Bashara, have you had the opportunity to review the pre-sentence investigation report?
You
Your
can
Honor-
just see the sir.
Okay. Your Honor, I have not had the opportunity to fully read it. It's my understanding per court rule that I have 48 hours to do so. I have asked Mr. McCarthy if he would ask the court to authorize a 24-hour extension to allow me to do so and add an item that is not in here to the record.
Judge, if I may, he was just brought down last night from the facility where he was housed. So that's why, and it was last night around 8:30. So there was no opportunity to take this particular copy over to the jail to have conversation with him. The first he's had of this pre-sentence report was this morning, Judge. So I do apologize.
Your Honor, I monitored Mr. Bashara's whereabouts over the last 3 days, and because I understood that he'd be returned sometime earlier this week, but he still was officially in the Oaks the last time I looked on the computer yesterday, and he related to me this morning when I met with him at 9 o'clock and gave him his copy of the report that he got to the jail facility at 8:30 last evening. So.
All right, very good.
Yeah.
He has to have an opportunity to review the pre-sentence report. No, but he's not getting no 24 hours or 48 hours. The court is going, if it was given to him at 9 o'clock, I'm going to have to recess this matter to 10:30. That he indicated for the record that there was something that was left out. So obviously there was an opportunity to review it, because if he didn't, he wouldn't know something was left out. You got a half an hour. These issues will be preserved if there's something that you want to do that I don't agree with. We just need to make a record, and then the Court of Appeals can properly review my decision. But I have to give them an opportunity to review that pre-sentence report. That's critical.
Thank you.
So we're going to have to reconvene at 10:30.
Thank you,
Your
Judge.
Honor,
Yep.
before-
Mr. Bashara.
Yeah, nothing.
May I stand and address the
No,
court?
you're just fine. Just stay seated. You okay?
Okay. Your Honor, if I may, I have some remarks I would like to say prior to my sentencing hearing beginning,
Okay.
that I would like to proceed in pro se with two issues that I wish to present to this court at this time.
So you don't want either of your lawyers?
At this point, I'm going to present this on my own without the, I have not had the benefit of my attorneys, given that my incarceration, well, I'd like to address the court if I may officially.
Okay, just stand up then. Okay, all right, I'm listening. Now, just sit down. Everybody just sit down. I mean, it's up to you. If you want to stand up, you can.
I would prefer to go to the podium if I might.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Miss Diallo, I don't need any comments.
No, there are
okay?
microphones over here, Judge. That's why I don't necessarily know how that's going to work out.
Okay, but good grief is not a legal comment.
No, it's a
Excuse
feeling
me,
that I
ma'am.
have, Judge.
Ma'am. I'm listening.
opportunity to address this court prior to my sentencing hearing beginning.
No, wait a minute, right, because you know you do have an absolute right to allocute. You're not allocuting, are you?
To do which?
That is to address the court about what it is that you want to say about this matter. Is this a legal motion?
Yes, I have two motions I would like to present to this court at this time.
Okay, that's all we're gonna do right now.
Correct.
Then after we do that, we have to take a break.
Yes, ma'am.
So that we can review the pre-sentence report.
Okay?
And I need both of those attorneys to have an opportunity to thoroughly go over it. And if that means that we need to get multiple copies.
I have one.
He's got his own
Everybody
copy,
has
Judge,
one.
and we all have copies.
Okay, very good. I'm listening to you, Mr. Bashir. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Again, good morning. I now wish to proceed, prior to this sentencing, to address this honorable court in pro se, on my own. Within 1 week after the verdict, I was transferred back to Oaks Correctional Facility. I had very limited access to the phone and no money on the phone. For 2 weeks, I made an attempt to call Mr. McCarthy and Mrs. Diallo with a 1-minute free call. But given the times that I had to make those calls, I was unable to connect. I finally was able to connect with Mr. McCarthy on January 8th at 8 a.m. on a recorded call where I asked to file an extension for 2 to 3 weeks so I may review the pre-sentence report and go over these two motions that I had wished him to assist me on. I needed their help to discuss and prepare those motions that I seek to present to you today for your consideration. He told me that he would not file the extension and that today was the day I would be sentenced. Then he indicated that he would not assist me in preparing these motions and that these motions weren't relevant to my case, which I disagreed with. Prior to closing the record, I want to make sure that these motions are on the official court record. With the court's indulgence, I wish to proceed and orally summarize these two motions so as not to burden the court's time by reading them in their entirety. I have prepared the written motions and wished upon my completion of these remarks to submit them for your immediate consideration. Your Honor, I have been handicapped by time as I've had only 2 days access to the law library at the Oaks facility and have not had the assistance of Mr. McCarthy. I was unable to reach Mrs. Diallo. And in fairness, I have tried to contact Mrs. Diallo, but was unable to. While these are two separate motions, they are very similar in content and example as to the issues prior to and in trial. The first motion is to preserve the official court record, properly identifying and recounting those issues that may have been left off the record or left part and partial to address them on the record. To summarize, both prior to trial and also in trial, I ask that several motions be filed with this court to seek a fair and just trial. This was never done, as I was told these actions would not be approved.
And you were told that by whom? You have to identify the speakers.
Okay, in our conversations with, I had numerous conversations with both Mrs. Diallo and Mr. McCarthy, both together and separately, where I'd asked that some of these motions, which I'm about to surmise, be filed. These areas to motion were: 1, to object, protest, and to ask this court to reconsider the ruling on the exclusion of Mr. Gentz from this trial. He is the only one who has accused me of any involvement in my Jane's death. Contrary to your ruling, this prosecution introduced 2 interviews and 3 witnesses who used his alleged words and statements. Yet, we didn't object to this These were allowed to be presented onto the court record. And so as a result, they were used in submission as both, I feel, hearsay at this trial. Allowing his words without having the opportunity to cross-examine him and have him face me as my only accuser is unfair and prejudicial, excuse me. Second area of concern is to restrict and remove all the media coverage in this courtroom and their live streaming, which I feel has corrupted these proceedings and unfairly compromised my right to a fair trial. Any witnesses prior to their testimony can easily follow the testimony of others, and also the comments outside the presence of the jury, which were viewable by their family and their friends, and could have very easily been shared with them. The reason that you asked the jury to leave, and you did rightly so in discussing matters of court rule and different evidence issues, was so that they wouldn't hear that. Live streaming, I feel, compromised that. This most certainly, I think, affected the mindset of both witnesses and jurors. My mother, God bless her heart, is a prime example, as she indicated on the stand that she was following along the live streaming. Excuse me. Third, the next major issue with the court's indulgence was the absurd comments by a majority of the jury pool during voir dire. Most all of those individuals replied to your question, have you formed an opinion, and said, Your Honor, and said, have you formed an opinion in this case, excuse me. And they said openly, yes, I think he's guilty. So not only did the prospective juror hear that, but the other jurors that had yet to be questioned and those that were seated that may have eventually been finally chosen did that. In most every case, you replied, rightly so, I believe, how can you form an opinion? You haven't heard a shred of evidence or testimony. And I think you were absolutely correct in that. And I think you were a little shocked and appalled by that. They all said that through the media, they formed those opinions. Those were chosen, heard this over and over and over again, I believe affecting their ability to be fair and impartial. 2 jurors voted to acquit per a TV interview, yet caved to pressure and undue influence by the others. And finally, I initially sought to have a motion to change venue, but was told that this would never happen, never been done, so it never got filed. The jury poisoning and the media corruption of this trial is the exact reason to change venue. How can any citizen be fair, just, and impartial with the blatant use of the media by law enforcement and by this prosecution to blacken my eye and make me a monster? So once again, this motion wasn't filed. If I may continue, that's the summary of the first motion for, and I will read what the actual motion is, if I may, and that is a motion for preserving issues for the court record, which I have a written copy which I wish to present to the court following my remarks.
Okay.
The next motion is similar in substance and example and is for an emergency motion for the ineffective assistance of counsel. This motion highlights the same 4 motion concerns I outlined and goes further to document the failure to call witnesses I wanted called, questions I felt should have been asked, places and people for our investigators to focus on, and documents and evidence to be entered into defense. The 8-page community service history record is but one example that I wish to have added to the PSI, to the pre-sentence report, and also added to each of these motions. I provided that pre-trial and asked that that be presented as defense evidence, and it was never done.
Now, what does this 8-page document say?
Pardon me?
The 8-page community what?
It's an 8-page community service record of my 40-year history from age 15 to the day the day of my wife's death, that I've done, that I and my wife, let me note that. Jane worked with me on many, many projects. Most recently was the one in December of 2011, our church's auction, in which her mother and father attended, and some of her family members attended, and my mother attended. And Jane and I co-chaired that auction together, working months before that. While these attorneys have many years of legal experience.
Excuse me, please, no talking in my courtroom. Please,
Pardon?
No, there's two individuals talking in the courtroom.
I can't hear you.
It wasn't addressed to you, okay?
sorry.
They heard what I said.
I'm sorry.
Watch those people.
There was, upon continued reflection, disregard to accept some of the direction and pursue areas I felt were important. An example of this is a failure to object and to allow the prosecution to use those two interviews, quoting Mr. Gentz's words, and the hearsay of Mr. Vagona, Ms. Rickinen, and the words only without the ability to cross-examine Mr. Baracco. These three were both all good friends of Mr. Gentz. This evidence was contrary to the court's ruling to exclude all words and statement of Mr. Gentz, yet no objection to these being used. As the trial progressed, there was continued and growing discourse and tension within the legal team, which made it uncomfortable. Additionally, there was more crucial was the effect on my representation in the outcome of the trial, I believe violating my Sixth Amendment rights. I was constantly told that my character was not crucial and that they wanted to focus on the crime itself. And I do understand that that's the most important thing to focus on, but in the final analysis, my character, or the deliberate destruction of it by this prosecution, I think in the final analysis, the lack of credible evidence would have shown me innocent, but the jury's contempt for who the prosecution painted me to be overshadowed all else. Mrs. Diallo said to me after the first week of trial, "I don't think the jury likes you. I see it in their eyes." Nothing was done to counter this attack on me by the prosecution, which was the responsibility, I believe, of the attorneys to protect and defend my best interests. Even, I hate to use his name, Charlie Langton, a legal analyst, made a comment saying, and I quote, "They made a monster of me, so it was easy for the jury to find me guilty." I have 40 years of excellent community service and asked many times to have that printout entered into evidence. This was ignored and rejected, which I feel is a breach of effective representation. In summary, I now ask the court to review this emergency motion, which would have been presented sooner if I had more time and assistance, and to find and declare a mistrial. That through the denial of the areas noted within this motion that were ignored and left from evidence, which caused tension and discourse. This resulted, I believe, in the ineffective assistance of counsel, and pray that this court renders a reversal of this judgment and a mistrial. I thank this court for its patience and attention. and await your thoughts and rulings. I have these two motions which I wish now to give to your court officer. I have noted Exhibit A, which is the inclusion of